Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you so much for that nice introduction. This is just fantastic for me. I couldn't be more excited. I will say I am a professional that speaks. I am not a professional speaker, so bear with me. I'm going to do my absolute best. I'll try to keep this going relatively quickly and keep it exciting and fast-paced to the best of my ability. But I do have a lot of data and I have a lot of information that can be rather detailed. So again, I'm going to move relatively quickly, but absolutely feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions at all. I think the first, and I was, thank you, and I was given some prep work, and so I try to do my best to accommodate that prep work and address it accordingly. But first of all, a little bit about me, the journey, Cal Poly, go Bronx. I now am a VP of hotel sales. And I'm not actually physically selling hotels. Hey, do you want to buy a hotel? That's not what that means. What I'm really doing is sending meetings to these hotels. And so we have a huge portfolio of hotels. I'll get into the details a little bit more, but that's essentially the impetus behind my role, is to drive business to the hotels so that the whole mechanism can work from a funding perspective. And I'll get into those details a little bit more. 9 years with LATCB as of this year, and I can't believe it's gone by so fast, but it's just been an amazing experience. But believe it or not, 40 years within the hospitality industry. And I know everyone always does the jokes, yeah, I started at 2, but that would still make me 42 years old, so I don't really have any reason to joke. I started at 16, and I literally have been now about 32 years in the hotel business or hotel related, including what I'm doing now. So it's just been a great run. Love the industry. I love what all of you are doing to keep this industry progressive thinking and innovative, which we'll be getting into more. I started out, and this is sort of one of those typical stories, but I literally started out as a waiter's assistant. I had a buddy of mine leave a job. He said, hey, love working there. Would you be interested? I said, well, sure, I'll give it a shot. So at 16 years old, I was a waiter's assistant, not knowing that that was really a busboy, but boy, did I love it. And it sort of got into my, my genes, if you will, and absolutely loved being in the hospitality industry. Started out in food and beverage for the most of my career, event sales. It was kind of more reactive selling. I don't like to say it, but it was more sort of order taking, if you will. But coordinating events is how I started, and I absolutely loved it. Then I made a transition into group sales, and that's really more hotel sales, and that was more proactive selling. So I learned the ins and outs and the sort of tactics and strategies about proactive selling, and again, profitability and the importance of top line or driving top line for a business. The path, and I'm only sharing this because I think this industry and that you've chosen to get into and the path that you're going to ultimately hopefully enjoy can be an amazing one. From my start as a waiter's assistant at Oakmont Inn to a little bit of a more fine dining restaurant called Equus, Fountain Grove Inn, which was a small boutique property, then going to college at Cal Poly Pomona. I started my first real job after Cal Poly Pomona with Marriott, then Red Lion, then HEI Starwood, Hilton, Doubletree. I have to read it because I can't remember. And finally with Beverly Hilton. And along with those types of experiences from a brand or a hotel perspective, engaging just amazing people, amazing leadership, coworkers, what have you, I also enjoyed being moved around for each one of these jobs. Started in Santa Rosa, where I was born and raised as that waiter's assistant. Then went to Pomona and worked odd jobs, including manpower planning, which I don't know if that still exists, but that was like a temp service agency for banquets and so forth. And I used to do that quite a bit. Anaheim for my first real job with Marriott. Maui, Santa Barbara, Portland, Seattle, Santa Rosa again, Pasadena, Beverly Hills, Manhattan Beach, Burlingame, and Los Angeles. And I only share that with you because if I was even more adventurous, I probably could have ended up in Europe. I probably could have ended up on the East Coast. I could have ended up anywhere I wanted to if you put your mind to it. And so there's a real fantastic opportunity in this tourism and travel industry, in the hospitality industry. So positions started out at the absolute, bottom, if you will, and you work your way up again with tenacity and commitment. But these are all abbreviations, and I thought it was kind of funny if I'd share. I was a catering sales manager, and then an SCSM, which is a senior catering sales manager, a director of catering, a director of catering convention services, a director of sales, a director of sales and marketing, an area director of sales and marketing, which means you have multiple units, and then an area sales leader, which I had 16 properties right here in Southern California, from Marina del Rey to Long Beach, and then now in my VP job. And What I wanted to reference, though, is Collins College and the ability to be. I was honestly a bit of a substitute for my boss on the board of advisors, but it has been the most incredible experience to be surrounded by those types of figureheads and leaders within the industry. And that has also elevated my experience and my value proposition, frankly, to those that I work with or beside. So it's been a phenomenal experience. And right now, really, to just sort of bottom line it is I am responsible for the global efforts for international meetings, conferences, incentives, and exhibitions. Some people know that as MICE, and you may be familiar with that term. And you can only imagine that with the pandemic, those are impacted quite greatly. LATCB. So that was about me. Now let's talk about the organization a little bit. And even though we're sort of small and mighty as it compares to major conglomerates, we have a lot of levers we're pulling on a daily basis to make us successful as an organization, but also the city successful as a destination. So we are a destination marketing organization, essentially a DMO, and many of you are probably familiar with that term already. We are contracted by the city of Los Angeles to market the city of Los Angeles. So it's a simple arrangement. Our North Star goal is visitation, and that's all about getting as many visitors as we possibly can to the city of Los Angeles. Our original North Star goal was to get to 50 million visitors by 2020. Well, we had an accelerated result. We actually got to 50 million visitors in 2018, which was phenomenal. So we celebrated that, and the economic impact and so forth was reflective of that. In 2019, we did sort of flatten out a little bit at about 50.7 million. And that was already an early indicator of some of the economic declines that we're about to experience, not knowing anything about a pandemic in the near future. So not only is visitation our North Star goal, but I like to kind of call it the nobility of tourism and everything that we're going to do within this tourism industry or hospitality industry. It's all about economic impact and job creation. Economic impact in 2018 was about $36 billion, that's with a big B, for Los Angeles from tourism. Job creation, about 525,000 jobs currently in the LA County area. And then general fund contribution. If you look at the taxation from all the revenue spent, if you will, it's about 1.7 billion. And somebody can fact check me, but that's an estimate. And again, you can get those resources from a lot of different places, but it's about 1.7 billion to the general fund. And that's public safety and infrastructure, pothole repair, whatever you want to chalk it up to. It's incredibly important. And then the product itself, the destination is 469 square miles. And it has something for everybody. So it can be very complex to get the message across. It's not just a simple widget you're trying to sell with certain benefits and features. It's almost infinite, and it's both tangible and intangible. So it can be a little bit difficult to sell. And we experienced 292 days of sunshine on average. And so there's no excuses not to experience the product, if you will, of LA. Now, our organization is kind of divided into functional expertise. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is this is all areas in which you could all graduate and become a part of, whether it's consumer marketing, travel trade, communications, PR, digital marketing, online primarily focused there, business affairs, programming, research, and sales. Those are our major disciplines, if you will, based on functional expertise. And then bottom line, we are a membership organization. We have 1,100 members, hotels, restaurants, venues, suppliers, buyers, etc., all members of our organization. Additional partners, and I won't get too into this because it gets a little complex, and I don't want to bore you, honestly. But if we look at the critical partners that we work with, the city of Los Angeles is obviously at the top. They are our customer, and as I said, they've contracted us to market the destination. The Department of Convention and Tourism Development is essentially a department within the city that is our supervisor. We sort of report to them. We give them our business plans, our projections, our performance, and they are essentially there to supervise our efforts. Los Angeles Tourism Marketing District, you'll see that there's a dollar sign in a parenthesis. That means it's a funding mechanism for us. And that tourism marketing district has allowed us to become a real player within this DMO game. Now, there's also a board, and we report to that board. So they're also a little bit of our boss and supervisor, if you will. Los Angeles World Airports, LAWA, that's LAX. They are a client because we actually have a marketing agreement with them, and we actually have a contract, I'm sorry, with them, and we do marketing for LAWA, including route development. Los Angeles Convention Center, we sell that. As an organization, we have a whole sales team that's dedicated to selling the conventions. And that would be a citywide convention. You might know E3, electronic music, electronic entertainment expo, excuse me. You might know that one because it's kind of a tech and gaming industry, but those types of events are happening at our convention center. And then LASIK, or Los Angeles Sports and Entertainment Commission. They're one of our partners as well. And they really sort of focus on mega events, as we say, so Olympics, MLB playoffs. In fact, they're responsible for the ALDS that you're seeing right now. Well, it's over. The A's lost to the Astros 10-5, but that's played here at Dodger Stadium, which is sort of odd because it's American League, but that was all LASIK that was responsible for securing that for the city and ultimately the impact that it has economically. Then finally, Los Angeles County Arts Commission, we have 218 museums. That's actually more than any other US city. Few people know that, but it's a really important element of our travel is indeed the culture component. And so again, these are our partners, and that's what makes up our organization as a whole. Next, we wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID. And I'll start out sort of specifically how it impacted Los Angeles Tourism Convention Board. Before COVID, or before the pandemic, we were a $60 million operation, and that's not for profit. So when you equate that to a typical corporation, you can use a 10x, and that could be a $600 million organization. But because we're not for profit, we have to spend it all, and so we have 60 million a year from a marketing perspective. We're not for profit, 501c6. I'll tell you why I brought that up in a minute. 150 employees before, 12 departments as I kind of went through, and we had 9 international offices. Now we're only a $12 million not-for-profit organization. And the reason I mentioned the 50C3 is because of 501c6 is because if we were a 501c3, which I don't expect you to understand the difference, we would have qualified for the PPP. That was the Paycheck Protection Program. We didn't qualify for that. So we had to really get lean quickly. And unfortunately, we made some really difficult cuts with some amazing people. And we went from 150 employees to 50 employees. And that's the reality that our industry is faced with right now. So I just wanted to share that with you. We went from an international or global focus, I should say, to really more of a domestic focus. And all of our programming, which is essentially scheduled events, has been completely eliminated because we just don't have the money. Next, LATCB, if you look at it just from some of the industries, if you will, LAX, 88 million passengers in 2019. We now have a 71% decline year to date. And mind you, January through March, we're essentially normalized. Well, maybe January through February, we're essentially normalized. So at only 25 million passengers annually, we'll probably see even more of a decline for next year. Hotels, we have 165 member hotels, 43,000 rooms in inventory on any given day, and 104,000 rooms in all of LA County. So it gives you an idea of that type of inventory that is affected directly by COVID. Our clients, we have 19,000 accounts that are in our CRM, our customer management system, if you will. Those 19,000 accounts want to come to LA, so we've had to manage them as well. And they are all individually impacted and have their individual stories of how they've been impacted as well. Venues and our strategic partners, if you think about Universal Studios, Hollywood, Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, the studios have been kind of double whammy because not only can they not host events, but they also can't produce, although those restrictions have been lifted a bit now, but it's been really tough for them. Our customer advisory board, which is kind of our steering committee, if you will. These are the best of the best when it comes to customers for large events in destinations. Their lives have been upended. So now we've had to retool that. Memberships, as I said, restaurant suppliers, we know the impact there. Funding channels, all impacted proportionately by the sort of scale of the business. So we went from 60 million to 12 million, as I said. Business affairs, our city officials and partner cities, What are they doing? How are they navigating through this? And how are they being innovative, if you will? And then finally, vendor partners. Those are the ones that supply us as an organization. How are they surviving? Um, Los Angeles, also the impact from a visitation perspective. International visitation is due to be down about 77.5%. The last time I shared this information in a presentation, it was only going to be down about 65%. That's what's in the parentheses there. So we're actually seeing a more rapid decline than we thought. Same thing with domestic, about 40% decline from the 43 million that we experienced in 19 to about 26 million in 20. And again, we're not entirely sure for 21 because again, we'll have a full year, but hopefully some recovery at the tail end of the year. So we're thinking it'll probably be around that 26 million, which is nothing to sneeze at. That is a great visitation rate. In fact, it compares with it's even the bottom 6 through 10 of destinations have about 26 million of visitors. So we'll be okay. Now, hierarchy of access, I just wanted to refer to that because that's sort of a customer's journey or a visitor's journey, if you will. Come to the airport first, then you take transportation to hopefully an accommodation, and then you're going to have your experience, whether it's a meeting and convention, which we hope for to open soon, or venues, attractions, restaurants, and shopping. That's sort of the hierarchy of entry. And as you can tell, that will be, every one of those are essentially impacted by the pandemic. The hotel closures impact. There was over 50% of hotels were closed in LA due to the pandemic, and they were calling it suspended operations. The good news out now is, in parentheses, we're only down to about 10% closures. We've seen a little decline in available inventory, but we are back and operating, so that's a good thing. Hospitality industry is one of the most impacted sectors from an unemployment perspective, and I know many of you have heard that. You've probably done studies. Initially, when I did this presentation, it was about 51%, and now we're seeing it hover around 40%. It is really difficult to assess, though, because we saw kind of a quick recovery with some of the limited capacities that were acceptable, but we don't know, is that going to now flatten out? So more to come on that. Projected loss of the direct visitor spending is about $13 billion. 24 was our record-breaking year, so at 13, you're more than 53% decline in direct visitor spend. That's going to hurt, and that's going to make us or enforce us to be innovative. Projected loss total to the tax funds that I was telling you about is about $1 billion of that $2 billion or so. Economic impact, I've shared this before, is about 9 times greater than that of the 9/11 experience, which some of you are probably too young. And then tourism economics says it's going to be about a 3.5-year recovery to get to 2019 levels. I'm going to go through this next stuff a little bit more quickly, but this is sort of industry related and how COVID has impacted the industry. Obviously, this is the deepest U.S. recession since World War II. We will return to 2019 levels at about the latter portion or Q4 of 21. And that's, again, risks are skewed to the downside. As you can see, this is provided by tourism economics. So this is a bit optimistic, but fortunately, we should see a good recovery by 21. When it comes to hotel demand, it's a 3-year recovery period. And the gray line is essentially the global financial crisis recovery, which took about 8 quarters. And the blue line is the global coronavirus recession, which is going to take about 12 quarters. The good thing about that is not elongated or protracted any more than the last time I did this information. So that's good, and these are updated reports. The scary thing, though, is room revenue. The first was demand, this is room revenue, and that's actually now about 15 quarters. So it has protracted a bit, and that makes sense because rates are dipping, RevPARs, so forth, are experiencing some dip. So you're seeing now comparatively a 9-quarter for the GFC or the global financial crisis, and now about 15 quarters, which is 3 years and 3 quarters of a year for recovery when it comes to that industry there. I'm sorry, for the room revenue there. Meetings. I had mentioned briefly how important they are. The anatomy of a travel recovery includes the meeting sector. Now, you can see at the beginning of summer, we did see domestic leisure and domestic drive and domestic fly return, and we're experiencing that now. However, essential meetings, Small and medium events, regional and so forth, are not going to start until Q1 of 21. And honestly, we think that's a little bit optimistic because you think of California, how strict we're being, meetings might be off in the distance a bit. And then large events, they're saying Q2 21, and that's on a global, I mean, I'm sorry, on a national level, but California could again be lagging. Why that's so important is because there's about $67 billion in direct spend for the state of California that has a group affiliation or its meetings business. That impacts about 50,000 jobs as well. Now, I want to leave a little bit of a nice note because I have to get into the innovation component of this too, but the industry has essentially leveled off at about a 50% decline at this point. So we seem to be flattening, and that's a good thing. Also, if you look at the destination, we are right up there with the top, even within the top 25, but we are top 2 when it comes to occupancy recoveries and RevPAR recoveries and room supply reductions. We're right up there as number 2 under San Diego. And San Diego has done a better job recovering because San Diego County has fewer COVID cases right now. But you can see the complexity of how a pandemic impacts not only the destination at large, but every component that's associated with that destination. And that's what I'm trying to sort of illustrate here. All right, so let's get to the more fun stuff. And what we're really here to talk about is innovation. And I don't want to run out of time, but in typical fashion, I had to have a title. So I called it Destination Marketing and Sales, Fact-Based Optimism and Trend-Based Agility. It's a little esoteric, but what I was trying to say is there are those that say positively, we're going to get through this. Nothing more frustrating than saying, we're going to get through this pandemic. You're absolutely right. But I'd rather change that positivity to fact-based optimism and say, okay, great, we're going to get through it, but how? And what are the facts that you're utilizing to make those decisions to determine that we are going to get through it? And that's where innovation comes in place. Same thing with trend-based agility. You've got to be nimble. And I don't know if you've heard the word pivot too much or what have you, but everyone's saying we had to pivot, we had to pivot. These are unprecedented times, we needed to pivot. Well, that's what we're going through. So their trend-based agility, or that trend-based agility, is just so critical. So innovation defined. I really struggled with this because when I was invited, I said, great, I love to speak, as you can tell. A lot, but I don't know if I'm a true innovator or if my team is or if the organization is. And thank God for Leah. She said, I understand your concerns, Bryan, but innovation does not always intersect directly with technology. I was hung up on the fact that we had to be, a tech giant that was making disruptive moves within the industry in order to be an innovator. And the fact of the matter is every day we are innovators. We are making decisions of change and so forth. So thank you, Leah, for helping me get through that. So I had to look it up though anyway, just to make sure. It's a word we use all the time, but I want to make sure because again, I put a lot of pressure on myself if I'm molding the minds of students. I want to make sure that I'm accurate. So Googled it. And basically simple, make changes in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, products. The act or process of introducing new ideas, devices, or methods. Well, we're doing that daily, aren't we? I mean, to some degree. So there's some level of innovation. But what it really boils down to too is it measurable? Does it have an impact? And what have you? And so that's what I want to kind of get into now. So innovation, again, pretty simple. Top innovators. To get my head wrapped around it even further, I wanted to take a look and say, okay, well, who's trending from a top innovator perspective? And to no surprise, the top 5, Apple, Alphabet, which is Google, Alphabet Holdings, Amazon, Microsoft, and Samsung. No surprises there. But what I was a bit surprised about is I didn't really see anything sort of hospitality or tourism related or what have you. Now, within many of these holding companies, they do have hospitality related companies, but number 34, at least from a travel perspective, they build airplanes. So they're innovative. And I thought that was good. Uber, we all know. And, again, talking about a disruptor, what a great service they provide. Nestle, really more, again, of kind of a conglomerate from consumer products and foodstuffs and what have you. But the reality of it is they're also somewhat related from a food industry perspective. Coca-Cola, we all know, and McDonald's. And, hats off to McDonald's making the top 50 list after all of these years of being such a legacy company. They're still considered one of the most innovative companies in the world. world. I think that's amazing, and it's a bit of a tribute to our industry, given that it's hospitality related. So the next thing is, these are sort of my opinions, if you will. And again, I was asked to sort of go over industries that I think are innovators. And the first one in my mind, of course, I think about burger joints and In-N-Out, of course. Talk about what a simple concept, and how well they've done to really change with the times from a product quality, service levels, and efficiency to maintain the relevance and maintain innovation. So that was one I didn't put on the list, but the next one is food trucks. Think about food trucks from literally in the 1800s, from a chuck wagon, where that was the wagon that all the other wagoneers went to eat, to the roach coach that essentially provided food on the street for those that were hardworking, to now our gourmet food trucks where you can get pulled pork and mac and cheese sandwich. These really innovative sort of things. So to me, that is a hospitality innovator. Online travel agencies, or the OTAs, Booking.com, Expedia.com, Hotels.com, all very much disruptors. Home share, Airbnb, we all know it, VRBO, to the point where it actually even, put hotels back on their heels. How are we going to compete with this home share idea that was absolutely innovative and different? And all this surplus inventory owned by individuals, and suddenly it became on the market. It's just amazing when you think about it. And why stop there? We have, cars, and so we have, that are also surplus. We have rideshare, Uber, Lyft, but don't stop there. We have scooters. So Bird and Lime came out. Mobile apps, again, pretty simple, and I know you're very aware of all this, but even from a large brand perspective, those that were maybe considered more of a dinosaur type of brand, smartphone reservations, remote registrations, keyless entry has become the norm. And again, so efficient. And ironically, it really held an importance as we embarked on this pandemic. All of that was no touch or low touch. So it was really helpful for the hotels to recover. Airlines. Now, airlines, I'm not deep enough into that industry to understand their innovation, but a plane is a plane. It's got to get from point A to point B. But one of the things that's frustration for everybody is the bottleneck from a human body movement perspective. How do we get passengers around? So you think about good old TSA pre-check, global entry, clear, mobile passport control. All of that has literally had an incredibly positive impact on travel, both domestically and globally. Robotics, I don't know if you've seen, Sheridan San Gabriel has 8 robots that are room service, bell service, wayfinding, what have you. They're literally on the staff now, and it allows the real staff to pay more attention to the customer. So it's actually improved customer service levels. Boutique hotels, another disruptor. You think about all the major brands, the Hilton, the Marriotts, of them, Starwoods, what have you. But the boutique hotels really differentiated themselves and created a unique experience. Rooftop bars, that was sort of a mandatory for all the boutique hotels. Curated experiences, kind of overused terms, but very, very valid. Unique, personalized, and immersive experiences. Live like a local, if you will. That was all very innovative. Hotels, the big brands. You think about Marriott, again, enormous, and as of late with their mergers and acquisitions, even bigger. Best Western, but they stayed nimble from an innovation perspective with their branding, so they could differentiate all these products. Distribution, so they could sell and get the products out to everyone. Revenue management, of course, so they could be profitable, and then marketing, so they could get the message out. And then finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't include my own industry, but DMOs, and there's truth to this. I'm not just showing deference here, but Brand USA, which is essentially the equivalent of our country's DMO, if you will, has done an amazing job advocating why the tourism and hospitality industry is essential for the U.S. economy. So they've done a phenomenal job. Destination International, or DI, they've done that from an association perspective, specifically on behalf of DMOs. And they have said, look, they're no longer handing out brochures and maps, as I said earlier. These are true economic engines. These organizations are making material, if not critical, changes and impacts to destinations. Next, I'm going to make this real fast. For me, innovation, it's not just sort of a hip term, it's a way of thinking. You've got to live it, you've got to breathe it. And again, this is Bryan's top 10. I am not an academic. So it's incredibly simple, incredibly fundamental, but that's the way I can live with it on a daily basis and apply it to my daily innovative thinking, if you will. So the first one, and again, a bit cliche, got to be hardworking, got to be tenacious, got to be committed, and for me, mostly inquisitive. Ask questions, be engaged. There's no I in team. I know these are cliches, but it's so true. You've got to engage those around you in order to be to learn, in order to be also relevant as you innovate. The next one is attitude. And yes, I saw this on a photo, or on a picture 100 years ago, and I'll never forget it. Attitude is the little thing that makes a big difference. And it absolutely 100% is. And you can just see it in the dynamics of a group environment. Attitude is king or queen. KISS, and I won't say it because it's got a bad word, but it's keep it simple, you know the rest, or keep it short and simple. This KISS principle for me has absolutely been important from my early days as as a young hotel guy to now. If things get too convoluted, much like this presentation, if they get too convoluted, you're going to lose interest, or you're going to lose the message, or what have you. Keeping it simple is absolutely critical. Hot food hot, cold food cold. Do what you intend to do. This is an old restaurant term, and you guys probably maybe you still use it. I don't know, it's old, but do the right thing or don't do it at all. And those things really translate when you're in a project mode, or if you're in a decision-making mode. Make sure you're making the right decision and stick to your guns. Do hot food hot. Don't compromise and do hot food warm. That's not going to get you there. 5 Ps. I've used this before too, and we're actually using it right now for our recovery plan. Prior planning prevents poor performance. And again, all it is instead of reacting and making an immediate decision, settle back a little bit, think about it, plan, think about all the impacts it's going to potentially have. Right now, we used, ironically, a 5R approach to the whole destination: response, relationship, record, reposition, and recovery. And that's our plan, which we use the 5 Ps to get to, if you will. Number 6, MBWA, management by walking around. That's, again, a restaurant term, but it's so true. Stay engaged. Don't, stay alone. Make sure you're reaching out to all your human resources, because they are your best tool. This question was brought to me by Dave Johnson, president and CEO of Red Lion Hotels, which many of you know, kind of a Pacific Northwest chain. They have gone through many different iterations, but they were an amazing hotel back in the 80s and 90s, hotel chain. Dave Johnson was the president and CEO, and we'd go to him with ideas, and his first thing out of his mouth was, "Great, what's your data?" And it got to the point that we used to call these great ideas hag fuzz. I have a good feeling about it. But the reality of it is you can have a good feeling, but without your data, it's not substantiated. So always know your data. NDHRC, never drive home reading comics. This one's a little bit ridiculous, but it's true. Needs, strategic level, tactical level, and personal level needs of whatever the project is or the customer that you're addressing. You need to know those needs. Drive is for decision making. What's the decision making process? Who's making the decision? Home is history. What's the history of this? Has this ever happened before? Is this the first time you're doing it? Has it been somewhere else? What have you? But it's a great question to ask. R is resources. Do you have the money? Do you have the people? Can you actually make this happen? And then comics, or C, is competition. Somebody else doing it, or should there be, or was there, or what have you. But a great way to look at, is there competition or maybe potentially obstacles in your way? 9 is, these last two are from Steve Heitzner, who was the chief sales officer for the Americas for Marriott. And I worked with him a long time ago, and these stuck. Success is never final. And it's absolutely true. If you think you can rest on your laurels after you've done something innovative, that's not true. Strategy without execution is hallucination. So you can come up with all these great ideas, but if you don't actually execute, that's a hallucination. And those were very real and very sobering comments when you would come up with these great ideas and you would say, no, that's a hallucination. So wanted to share that. So this next slides, and I'm not going to go through everything. What I did for this exercise, though, is, and what I would suggest you would do if you want to come up with an innovative decision or process, is you have to find the opportunity for innovation. And with LATCB, it went on and on and on. And I kind of had this brainstorm. I decided I'd share it. I'm not going to go through it all, but what's our mission? Short term, long term, international, domestic, national, regional, local, all of those have opportunity to be innovative, particularly right now after a post-pandemic scenario, or hopefully soon to be post-pandemic scenario. Data collection, critical. As I said, what's your data? The cancellation of rebooks, what are we going to do with that? How are we securing our future for the city? Hotel closures, all of these things impact us, but there's potential for innovation. The crisis recovery plan as an umbrella, what innovative ideas can we make or take at that point? I mentioned the optimism versus positivity. The other thing is we have to identify some of those hurdles that I mentioned earlier. Prohibition of travel, particularly for the Asian Pacific region. The Chinese travelers brought so much economic impact for the city. It was fantastic. We don't know when that's going to come back. US as a COVID hotspot, that's our perception now globally. How do we manage that? Civil unrest, politicizing travel. Oh, you're defunding the police? Well, we don't want to go to LA. And those are the kinds of things, those are the real things that we're facing. It's heavy hitting. Racial, misspelled, I apologize, equality. We are a very, very diverse destination. So we have to lead by example how we are racially inclusive. And we have already. We had an Everyone's Welcome campaign, in fact, about 2 years ago that was incredibly successful. But you're only good as your last booking, so to speak. So we have more work to do. Speed to market, geofocus. Now that's great. So what? You have that big long list, Brian. What do you do? So we decided as an organization, this was really led by our president and CEO, keep it really quite simple again. Focus on what's important and urgent, or urgent and important. And this is the Eisenhower matrix, if you will, but it's incredibly simple. So we took that long list and we said, okay, urgent and important, what decisions can we make to impart change, and how can we be innovative? And that was the first thing we did. And then we sort of got rid of everything else, or at least put it in the correct categories. The first example I want to give you, that this isn't nearly as exciting as an app or what have you, but it is top line and economic impact related, and that is as I said, our number one North Star goal. So this example is, how are we going to determine our production targets as a sales organization and as a marketing organization for future years when we no longer have trend lines that we can really rely on? If we don't have a historic post-recovery similar to this, what do we use as a tool? So those first two columns, and again, I'm not going to go into total detail, but the first two columns, Los Angeles tourism and individual hotels, those are things we can control. We have crossover history. That's sort of a pre-sold condition for future years. We have tourism economics trending, which is what I've been sharing with you. We have future pace reporting. That's a tool we have. Individual hotels, they have their corporate and brand directives and ownership directives, and also they have existing forecasts and targets. So we'll overlay that, and those are the items that we know and what we can control. But what we don't know is these external factors, the state and county open status based on health protocols and directives, demand drivers, what sectors and what demographics are going to be able to return to travel. Are we still going to focus on millennials, or should we focus on baby boomers because maybe they're less impacted by the pandemic, or should we focus on Gen Y or Z? We don't really know that yet, and so that's got to be still determined. And then finally is hotel availability. Even though they're all open, they will be reduced from a capacity perspective for months. So we have to really determine all of that, do an overlay to determine production targets for the future. And so again, that may not be, exciting innovation, but it is absolutely practical innovation. In fact, we're sharing it on Thursday with other DMOs to use it as a bit of a template or a blueprint for their efforts as well. So we're kind of proud of that. The next one quickly is virtual and hybrid meetings. Many of you might even be studying that or taking a look at it as an option. As we went from live events to virtual events, we're now sort of evolving to a hybrid event where those that, let's say the event is somewhere where it's safer in Vegas, or even another destination like Orlando. You can have the live event or a portion of it based on, appropriate social distancing. But you can also have a whole nother virtual component. So it's a hybrid where you have call in and virtual participation. This example is Cvent Connect. That's a lead distribution platform for the hotel industry. And they've been around for a while. You might know them. But CVent was way ahead of the game and decided they were going to go ahead and do their trade show, but they're going to do it entirely virtual. And the results were phenomenal. Typically in a live event, there'd be about 4,500 participants. In this particular example, there was 41,000 online participants. So you see the effectiveness. There were over 40 virtual exhibitors. We were one of them. 10 appointments per exhibitor. So we got to see sort of the breakout functionality of Zoom. It was a little kind of Zoom on steroids, but it allowed us to have individual appointments with customers virtually. And we walked away with RFPs or requests for proposals through walk-ups. We also have done some data mining now of that 41,000 because we were given that database. We now have new contacts and new accounts. And then there was an efficiencies perspective because it became more of a broadcast message instead of a narrowcast message. So you see, again, very, very innovative. And we're hoping this isn't going to be permanent. We don't want it to be all virtual, but the hybrid's going to be around for a while. And even the leaders of both Marriott and Hilton believe that's going to be around for a while. So there's another industry, another opportunity for us from an employment perspective in the near future. The next is sales, and I think I'm running out of time. The next is sales communications. These are really just, they're not all that innovative, if you will, but what we've changed is the use of them is more innovative. We had these tools, we've just improved upon them. And so now sales communications, meaning our selling efforts, is virtual or online. We have a new platform called Digideck, which is kind of a what do you call it? It's a PowerPoint, again, accelerated, that has a nonlinear approach. So you can go through your presentation and have embedded videos and so forth. It's pretty amazing. Next thing is virtual site inspections. This is an unbelievable experience, and I'll send this to you guys, but you can literally hover and dive throughout the whole city of Los Angeles and all of its venues and experiences, and it's phenomenal. Now, we had that available, but it was more of a novelty, and now it is actually one of our tools. So again, pretty innovative, and fortunately we were ahead of the game because those that are trying to replicate this technology now at a destination level are really having a difficult time doing it. Marketing messaging. So drive markets, and this just shows innovation from assessing your market potential early. Drive market, it becomes really intuitive that if you can't fly and you can only drive, then that's what we need to focus on. So all of our marketing from a transit perspective or a leisure perspective went to drive, drive, drive. Now, as we begin to see the recovery, we'll expand that marketing, but that was what we wanted to focus on initially. And if you can see, more than 65% of travelers want to stay within a 3-hour drive of their home. And that was the most recent data that we had. And the market's expanded to what you think wouldn't be normal, a Fresno, but Sacramento, sure, San Diego, San Francisco, plus Vegas, Palm Springs, Phoenix, and Santa Barbara. Those were sort of tertiary markets. Now they're our primary markets. So you see how you can be innovative and flexible with that. So I'll leave you with this. That's a lot of information. And again, it's one man's opinion. So I appreciate you indulging me. But fact-based optimism is really what I want to leave you with. There is a decade of opportunity for the destination of Los Angeles. And if you look at just these, and I've used the slide before, so you may have even seen it, but if you look at these mega events that we're fortunate to host in the next decade, it just shows that there is that tenacity, and there is that commitment, and there's that absolute ability to turn this industry around in the next decade. And we are fortunate to be at one of the best destinations to do so. So this is kind of a look into the future of opportunities for all of you. So that is it, and that's all I got.
Well, we have some questions in the chat, so I'll kind of start from the beginning. Do you want to briefly describe your day-to-day responsibilities?
Wow. Well, what they were and what they are now currently, it is really changed. One of the things that we were driven top line. So it was all about sales. I was actually doing a lot of international travel, going to trade shows, speaking, similar engagements, but just about the destination and what we can offer to buyers, if you will. That was my typical sort of day-to-day. I had a team of 22 that were direct reports, so that was a lot to manage. But we also had international representation firms that essentially we had contracted, but we supervised. So that was sort of the typical day before the pandemic. Now, however, what we really are is the curator of information. We don't necessarily want to be the actual expert, but we have relationships with the experts. So we are the curator and provider of information that is allowing our constituency and our stakeholders to recover. And that's put me in a position where I do have to be innovative. I have to try to find the new ways and the new methodologies, and determine what's your data. Does that make sense? Is there a better way or what have you? But I have been just now, it's been exhausting, but for the last 6 months, it's sort of reinventing the wheel in a new environment that we've never been in before. So that's kind of day to day now.
Thank you. How would you connect tourism with helping and promoting small business? And how did this contribute with interest in visiting LA? And how can they be as assets in bringing in new visitors?
So, small businesses?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so it's because we're tourism, we are focused on, tourism related industries, if you will. And from a small business perspective, whether it's an audiovisual company, a transportation company, a restaurant, or what have you, we constantly do referrals. And so that in again, the good times, that was our methodology in which their membership would get benefit. Referrals, listings, distribution of those referrals and listings in a global sense. So they had access to customers that they would not normally have access to. From a formalized programming perspective, we have restaurant weeks. There are actually 2 weeks twice a year. And so those have a real positive impact on our restaurant industry, which right now is obviously hit probably the hardest. So that's another way that we as an organization have been able to drive revenues to those small businesses.
The figures that you showed earlier, were any of those based on room donations to first responders for COVID?
Which figures?
The graphs that had like your RevPAR, your occupancy rates.
Oh,
those.
Are they based on the rooms to first responders? Is that what the question is? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Are the figures, those figures
Key?
based on donations?
Yeah, Project Room Key. Yeah, I guess that's, I'm not exactly sure the question, but yeah, so some of that occupancy is based on that, absolutely. But now that is really not even, part of the mix. There's a few remaining, but we're back into true consumer demand.
How do the Olympics figure into projected recovery for LA?
Well, very positively. And in fact, before the call officially started, Ann and I were talking about that now they went from originally 42,000 rooms needed to 52,000 rooms. Again, this is 2028, but there's a halo effect. Whether it's tournaments or planning committees or what have you, before and again after, there's a halo effect for having the Olympics. So this is going to have a very material and positive impact on us. Right now, in fact, believe it or not, 8 years out, we're trying to secure the accommodations agreements for those 52,000 rooms. And there's a whole formula in which we're committing to the rates and so forth, but we'll be able to determine economic impact based on that. So it's very, very positive.
If as freshmen and transfer students are looking at a 2 or 4 year time frame for graduation, what is your prediction about their ability to enter the hospitality job market in 2 to 4 years?
Well, if it's 4 years, I'd say don't worry for now. I mean, and again, I don't want to be positive. Don't worry. I want to have fact-based optimism. But based on all the trend lines that I just showed you, it's 3.5 to 4 years. So if we're back to 2019 levels within 3 or 4 years, you guys are going to be golden. Now, 2 years, I think we have to just be creative and innovative in the way that you enter into this marketplace. Like I said, if I refer to this hybrid meeting industry, this is going to be big for a while. Don't know if it'll have a full 24-month shelf life. I don't know. It might be longer, but there's an opportunity. Some of these technological applications when it comes to the efficiencies of hotels, absolutely critical. So 2 years, I don't want to speak to because I don't have fact-based optimism on that, but 4 years, I'd say you have nothing to worry about.
What innovative strategies do you foresee for the World Cup 2026?
Innovative strategies. Well, so we've had, yeah, boy, that's a process. We could talk for an hour. And in fact, I even have the RFP in front of me here because we've been working on it now, but it's incredibly convoluted and rightfully so. They want to do it correctly. And the planning committee is the brilliant of all brilliant planning committees. They are just amazing, and they've done this, and the complexity of the event and so forth. They've done this for years, so they have they're very scrutinizing, and they have very critical objectives that they must accomplish. We as a destination have a ton of advantages from a global perspective as we speak right now, particularly as a West Coast destination or a Asia Pacific gateway. That will be absolutely critical. The other thing is, again, this sort of halo effect of a proven destination with multiple and new SoFi Stadium, as an example, venues. We're kind of top of the heap. So we're able to, I don't know if it's true innovation, but we're able to differentiate ourselves with our value proposition in that regard.
All right. How do you gain experience in marketing and sales with your hospitality degree? What are some entry-level opportunities?
Yeah, that's, again, I don't have my data. I kind of fell into it by becoming a member of a destination marketing organization. In my earlier days, you transition from sales to sales and marketing, and usually, and this is hotels anyway, usually you have a marketing team that you collaborate. It's a shared service organization that's providing marketing services for multiple properties. You sort of insert your toe in, and you learn about all that they're doing and the costs that are associated with it and the benefits as well. So that's how I learned about it. And it was, again, purely organic. I was not a marketer. I thought I was a sales guy. Now I'm fascinated by marketing and the data and so forth as well that surrounds it. I wish I had a better answer. I think, again, when you're taking your electives, make sure that you have some marketing classes that are appropriate, and then you can really leverage that to get into sort of the marketing elements of the tourism or hospitality industry. It's not going away. Marketing is key, particularly online or digital.
Do you feel Los Angeles has the capacity to host a large music festival?
Yes. I mean, I think it would be venue dependent. And if you're talking Los Angeles city limits, you're probably going to have to do it in a stadium environment. We wouldn't be able to replicate, a large outdoor festival. But South by Southwest and a couple of other major music fests have approached us to do either a version of or a movement of international music festivals. So we're absolutely ready to do it. Festivalization, which I'm sure you've heard, is a term now used from an economic impact perspective and to drive visitation, because there are a ton of travelers that come into a festival, whether it's music or otherwise. So yes is the answer. I don't think it would look like those, out in the desert or something like that, but.
Thank you. Janelle asks, how do you pivot from operations into sales and marketing? How do you capitalize on your transferable skills?
It's such a great question. Well, I think build the skills. So if you are in pure operations, then just make sure that you're expressing your interest in getting into a selling capacity or a marketing capacity. I think that's important, and that's part of that sort of tenacity that I say, and make sure that you're inquisitive. Hey, I love operations, but I really want to get into sales. How can I do that? And within your respective organization or employer at that point should give you those resources. And frankly, if after a while they don't, then maybe that's the wrong organization for you. And while you're young, it's time to make changes. You can kind of see my path, although some may say, oh, you bounced around, Bryan. I didn't bounce around. Every move I made was a conscientious move that allowed me more responsibility and, frankly, a bigger paycheck. So it made sense every time I moved. And oftentimes those moves are within one organization, just better positions. So yeah, you might call it bounce around every 18, 24 months. You're in a new job. But in hindsight, I would do it no other way. It was a fantastic experience where I could hone my craft by moving around in both geographic and professional locations. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Those are all the questions we have in the chat, and we're down to about the last 3 minutes. Does anyone we can unmute and ask a question, or any last call for questions in the chat before we sign off?
Nothing?
Nothing. That's it. You answered everyone's question.
But listen, seriously, before you let me go, thank you all so much. I know your time is so valuable right now. You're working so hard in a very uncertain industry and environment. So kudos to you. Stay the course. Like I said, fact-based optimism, 2, 3 years, 4 years from now, we'll be back to normal. So let me know if I can help any way. And I will send this information out, as you said.